going on, guys? I am Kadarius Washington, and this is indeed the Sports Rundown. Well, we had the first round of the NBA draft last night. As you guys know, it is a 2-day event now. We had the first round last night, and we've got round two later on tonight. And to the surprise of absolutely no one, Cooper Flagg out of Duke goes number one overall to the Dallas Mavericks. Dylan Harper out of Rutgers, no surprise, goes number two to the Spurs. And then the draft really began at number three when the Philadelphia 76ers took VJ Edgecombe out of Baylor. Con Knuppel, who was Cooper Flagg's teammate at Duke, he goes number four to the Hornets. We knew he was going to be a lottery pick. And then at number five, the Utah Jazz take Ace Bailey out of Rutgers. And we all know the reports that Ace Bailey was skipping team meetings. He didn't want to practice with any of the teams. And apparently he had a list of teams that he didn't want to go to. And apparently the Jazz was one of them. Now listen, for a guy who did a grand whopping nothing at Rutgers, the only significant thing he did was the third team All Big Ten and the All Freshman team. But outside of that, for a guy who did a grand whopping nothing at Rutgers, he sure has a lot of cojones talking about where he does and doesn't want to get drafted to. I mean, bro, just be happy that you got drafted, all right? Dang. But anyway, Ace Bailey goes number five to the Jazz. There was early smoke that he was going to go to the Sixers, but the Jazz end up taking him, and of course the Sixers take Edgecombe, as I mentioned. Another player that I was interested in seeing drafted was Colin Murray Boyles out of South Carolina. He goes number 9 to the Toronto Raptors, and of course, if y'all don't know, Colin Murray Boyles is dating Chloe Kitts, who is an absolutely phenomenal player for the South Carolina women's program, who could very well be a lottery pick next year in the WNBA. And plus, they are getting a team in Toronto next year. Do with that what you will. But nevertheless, it was also interesting to see that Colin Murray Boyles was the first player in South Carolina men's history to be taken as a lottery pick. So he goes number 9 to the Toronto Raptors. And looking at these picks, two teams who I really thought had an incredible first round, who did a really good job in the first round, was the Spurs and the Utah Jazz. Of course, the Spurs taking Dylan Harper, like I mentioned, and then taking Carter Bryant out of Arizona at number 14. And then the Utah Jazz, aside of getting Ace Bailey, they also pick up Walter Clayton Jr., who was one of the heroes behind the Florida championship team from the past NCAA tournament. So I thought those two teams had a really good draft, and the Brooklyn Nets had an absurd 5 first-round picks, and they used their first 4 picks on guards. They didn't pick a forward until 27 when they picked Danny Wolf, who came out of Michigan. So that was a pretty interesting scenario there. And then my Boston Celtics at number 28, we take Hugo Gonzalez out of Spain. And speaking of the Celtics, they opened up the offseason in a pretty significant way. I mean, literally 24 hours after these OKC raised the Larry O'Brien trophy, we get the news that the Celtics traded Drew Holiday to the Portland Trailblazers for Anthony Simons and a couple of second-round picks. And then we get the news later on in that day that the Celtics traded Kristaps Porzingis to the Hawks as part of a 3-team deal. Now, listen, I firmly believe that Boston does not win the championship last year without Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. They were major pieces for us. And of course, Drew Holiday, he was traded to Portland a couple of years ago, and then we ended up picking him up as part of another trade. And apparently there was a report saying that he didn't want to play in Portland. So the question is, does Portland actually keep Drew Holiday, and how long does he stay there? But nevertheless, I really did like the Drew Holiday trade, because think of it like this. the Boston Celtics are not going to be competing for much of anything next year, especially since Jason Tatum tore his Achilles in the Eastern semifinal against the Knicks. So we're not really going to be competing for, I don't think we're going to be competing for much of anything. So I understand what Brad Stevens is doing, unloading some of our older players to take care of this payroll. And the Anthony Simons deal, who's a really good player coming from Portland, who's a high-volume three-point shooter, which fits Joe Mazzulla's system. And, of course, this system is just players running around and jacking up a bunch of threes all day. But we get a really good player in Simons on an expiring contract, and we get free second-round picks out of that. And then, of course, the Porzingis deal, too. So, and now there's some reports saying that Jaylen Brown and Derek White are apparently on the block, which selfishly I really don't want to happen. I want to see Jaylen Brown and Derek White stay in Boston, so when Jason Tatum does become healthy, we'll have that core to hopefully make another run. But I'm going to trust Brad Stevens. I'm going to trust Brad Stevens and his offseason decisions, because the last time Brad Stevens made some significant offseason moves, it kind of worked out for us. You know, it kind of worked out. So I have trust in Brad Stevens, and hopefully these things turn out well. But nevertheless, we have the second round coming up later tonight. We got trades flying left and right, and hopefully we get a significant blockbuster trade. I was hoping we would get one last night, but obviously that wasn't the case. So I definitely hope we get a couple of blockbusters, maybe one good blockbuster, you know, give us a little chaos to especially help get this off season going. Not really a lot of big names in the second round, unlike last year when it was the whole Bronny James situation, but I'll be into it. I'll be interested in the second round and seeing how everything else plays out. Like, comment, subscribe. Click that notification bell to be notified of when I post again. And also follow me on Twitter and on Bluesky at CW Talk Sports. That's CWTALKS Sports. Brad Stevens, get us another one of these t-shirts. Get us another banner. I trust you, bro. I will see y'all the next time. Peace.